Here we have Pinus strobus, the eastern white pine, and I just planted this specimen here in an area that's partly sunny, partly shady, and also very well drained, but it does get a little bit of runoff. So in the past I have posted a few videos saying that you should not attempt to grow white pine in Middle Tennessee, but at the same time there are a lot of large specimens and even some recently planted ones that are doing well. So I saw this one at Lowe's and the price wasn't too high, so I figured I'd give it a try in a somewhat experimental location. It's not full sun, and it's not that crowded, and it's not in an area that is threatened by any of the many fungal root diseases that I have problems with. So it's just an experiment to see what it does. But here we have the eastern white pine, and we're in the middle of, actually beginning of April right now, and it's just starting to break bud. Put up some candles there. No new needles yet, but it looks pretty good. Let's take a look at the rest of the conifer collection to see how things are coming along for the spring bud break. This is Pinus glabra, spruce pine, already putting up some large candles, and the needles have turned a nice green after remaining almost yellow most of the winter. So I think it may be a lot like the Virginia pine in that the needles turn a little bit yellow in the winter and then green back up as soon as spring comes along. Speaking of Virginia pine, here it is. Pinus virginiana, sending up some large candles. This is always a very fast and reliable grower, and this pine is actually native to Middle Tennessee. Oh, there's a new cone. And it is notable for its ability to withstand drought and grow in poor soils, and also it has multiple pushes of growth each growing season, which means it's a fast grower. Sometimes too fast if you water it. So as I've mentioned in a few other videos, if you're growing Virginia pine in Middle Tennessee, do not water it because the rain we have is more than enough for it. Here is the Table Mountain pine, Pinus pungens. Kind of a small seedling, not really a seedling anymore, just a really tiny tree, but obviously putting on new growth for the season. This is the Vanderwolf's pyramid pine, either Pinus flexilis or Pinus strobiformis, depending on where you land on that debate. But it is already putting up these new candles all the way up to the top of the tree, looking really good. And so far, other than the one that I lost, this has also been a very reliable grower here in Middle Tennessee. Here is loblolly pine, Pinus taeta, and this is always going to be the fastest and most aggressive growing pine tree you can plant. And as you can see, it is already off to a fantastic start. Those candles must be 8 inches or more long, and it hasn't even really put out any needles yet. So before the growing season is over, I'm sure this tree will put on 5 feet vertical and really increase in size. And the foliage looks great. Here's longleaf pine, Pinus palustris, starting to send up its very durable, thick main leader here, which will of course put out those needles that are about a foot long each. Few side branches forming there, it looks like. There's one little one there. And I would say it's still in the candelabra stage because it has a few side branches, kind of hard to see amongst all of the insanely long needles. But it doesn't have that many side branches, so I wouldn't say it's in the tree form yet. Still mainly pushing vertical. Here's the pitch pine, Pinus rigida, already putting up candles there. This should be another great growing season for the pitch pine, which does very well in this area. Here's the Japanese white pine, Pinus parviflora. You can see there's the normal look of the needles, but it's putting off an insane number of densely clustered candles here. So I'm hopeful that it will put on some decent vertical growth. overall it's fairly slow growing. This is the glabra cultivar of Pinus parviflora. Not really much action here yet on the Pinus echinata shortleaf pine. It probably gets half-day sun and might prefer a full-day sun, but I think that's going to be enough for it. But so far it has not put out any new growth, nor do I really see any candles forming. And the tips look like they might have also been damaged by late frost, maybe? Not sure. We'll see what happens with the shortleaf pine. Here's the Scotch pine, Pinus sylvestris, also planted in a location that gets about half-day sun, and it looks like it is putting up some good candles. So, good news for the Scotch pine. And here's also a quick look at the male pollen cones of Virginia pine, Pinus virginiana. There are actually a lot of them on this particular tree. Pretty interesting. Leaving the pines now and moving on to the yew trees. This is Japanese plum yew, Cephalotexus harringtonia. And you can see the main leader is starting to push there. And there is a lot of growth on the side branches as well, that new lime green foliage coming out. And here is the Chinese yew, Taxus chinensis, also putting on new growth. Not a lot, but pretty decent, and characteristic of yews, it's also able to put on growth right off the branch. So they're good about being able to fill in nicely if they are sparse, like this particular specimen. And here's the English yew, Taxus baccata, just starting to break bud. And here we have the Japanese yew, Taxus cuspidata, also breaking bud now. Here's the Hicks yew, which is a hybrid between English and Japanese yew, also breaking bud. And here is the Florida yew, Taxus floridana, also putting on new growth. I don't have this one in the ground yet, but I will soon. Leaving behind the yews, now we come to the true firs, starting with Abies firma, Momi fir from Japan. And as you can see on this branch, there were 3 buds right here at the tip. The center bud and the one to the right were killed by a late freeze, and the one to the left was not damaged and is pretty far along and leafing out. So I would say overall on this particular tree, I probably lost 60% of the buds, but there were so many that it will still put on decent growth, and I'm hopeful that maybe later in the year it will add some new buds and more growth, especially at the top, because almost all of them at the top were lost, and most of the ones lower down on the tree must have been more protected from the cold. There's still a decent number breaking bud. Here's the Nordmann fir, Abies nordmanniana. No new foliage yet, but the pollen cones are out in full effect. And the Taiwan fir, Abies kawakamii, is just starting to break bud on the lower branches. This is the Nikko fir from Japan, Abies homolepis, also breaking bud. And it was not damaged by the late frost because it was slower to break bud, which is a good sign that Nikko fir might be better for Middle Tennessee than Momi fir. There are still a few signs of life on the Abies pensapo here. Let's see if I can focus that. I'm not sure if that purple thing there in the center is a cone or a pollen cone or what, but that's the first time I've seen that. Overall, the Spanish fir, Abies pensapo, looks pretty bad. And it's had several bad growing seasons, I think damaged by cold. And I would reiterate to anyone attempting to grow fir in Middle Tennessee that you should probably avoid most Mediterranean origin, or most fir trees originating from the Mediterranean, because they are just not going to be cold hardy enough. The ones from Turkey seem to be okay because it gets a lot colder in Turkey than it does, especially the mountains of Turkey, than it does most of the Mediterranean, so that would be the one exception. But anything from warmer parts of the Mediterranean, as far as firs go, should probably be avoided. Here's the concolor fir, AB's concolor. No real activity yet, but it is still kind of early in the season. And we'll see what this particular one does. This is the blue cloak cultivar. And as I mentioned in another video, it's been having some trouble with needle loss. But the buds still look okay, I would say. No movement yet, though. This is the Vejar fir, AB's Vejarii from northeastern Mexico. Starting to break bud and looking really good all over. It's a different white fir here, AB's concolor, not the blue cloak cultivar, and no real movement yet. Also, some of the tips of the needles look a little brown, so I don't know what that is either. And this is not a fir, not a true fir, but it is the Douglas fir, Pseudotsuga menziesii, and it looks like it's starting to break bud. Okay, here's a better look at that Douglas fir when it's not in shadow. And I think I see some activity on the buds. Some of the outer layers starting to peel off, so I think it won't be long until the Douglas fir is breaking bud. Overall, the needles look pretty good. Here we have the Korean fir. This is the Silberlock cultivar, and it's just starting to break bud with a lot of buds on this particular one. No movement yet on the hybrid AB's concolor, AB's grandis. And going back to my earlier comment about Mediterranean firs, this was the AB's numidica, Algerian fir, but I'm nearly 100% certain that it was killed when the temperature dropped to 4 degrees Fahrenheit here. So a failed experiment. I will replace it with something else. That's it for the firs. Let's check out the deciduous conifers real quick. This is bald cypress, Taxodium disticum. Already off to a great start. Here's pond cypress, Taxodium ascendens, also looking good. Here's dawn redwood, Metasequoia glyptostroboides, looking very good, and really no doubts about this one. It is always a star performer. Even though it's from central China, it is very well suited to grow it in Middle Tennessee. And here's the Japanese larch, Larix camphori. Kind of a risky proposition to grow in Middle Tennessee, but so far I've been lucky and haven't had any problems, and it's been putting on good growth, and it is always one of the first to break bud. This foliage, by the way, was all out when the temperature unexpectedly dropped into the 20s a while back during that late frost that damaged the momi fir, but the Japanese larch was not damaged in the least, which just goes to show you how cold tolerant the larch is. It's going to be between this and maybe white spruce or black spruce of which tree would survive the coldest temperature in this collection. Speaking of spruces, let's check that group now. This is the Lijiang spruce, Picea lijiangensis. This very small specimen is already breaking bud, but my larger one has not yet. And no bud break on the tigertail spruce, Picea polita. The Notha hybrid spruce, which is a hybrid between Picea glenii and Picea jesuensis, has also broken bud. You can see there are a few brown buds where it did lose some during a late frost, but most of them are okay, it looks like. This small specimen of oriental spruce, Picea orientalis, is starting to break bud, but the larger ones have not yet. This is the Van Speybrok cultivar. This is the blue Norway spruce. Cultivar name is Paul's Select, and it's already putting out some great growth here at the main leader, and the side branches are further along, and it is very noticeable how much bluer than normal the foliage on this blue Norway spruce is compared to the regular Norway spruce. By the way, Norway spruce is Picea abies. The Korean spruce is breaking bud, Picea koreana, looking good. The Yunnan spruce, Picea purpurea, also a lot of bud action going on here. Some that haven't broken and some that have. No movement yet on the Chihuahuan spruce, Picea chihuahuana, but it looks like it might be getting ready to. Some of the Norway spruces have started to break bud. Once again, Picea abies, and this is the regular green one. Here's Picea aspirata, dragon spruce, looking really good. And no movement yet on the Serbian spruce, Picea omorica. Also no movement on the red spruce, Picea rubens. The Wilson spruce, Picea wilsonii, has definitely broken bud. Shrink's spruce, Picea shrinkiana, a little bit of bud break, but it looks like this might be another year with lots of bud loss. Here's the Qinghai spruce, Picea crassifolia, breaking bud. And the Myers spruce, Picea meyerii, also having bud break. Some of the white spruces, Picea glauca, are coming along nicely. This is the Black Hills cultivar, Picea glauca variety densata. Here's the Szechuan spruce, Picea montagina, breaking bud nicely. And here's the black spruce, Picea mariana, also breaking bud. This is not a spruce, but this is the Japanese umbrella pine, Ceodopatus verticillata, just starting to break bud. A very slow-growing, but really interesting conifer. Moving on to the cedars, the deodar cedar has broken bud. Very minimal foliage damage during the recent cold spell. And the Atlas cedar, Cedrus atlantica, is also just starting to break bud. And I forgot to mention on the deodar cedar, this is the Cedrus deodara Carl Fuchs cultivar. Maybe one or two cultivars of this species that are cold hardy enough to live in Middle Tennessee. The other might be the ice regan cultivar. But the thing that makes these two cultivars able to be more cold hardy is that they originate from Afghanistan, high up in the mountains, which gets colder than the rest of the Himalayas, where this species usually grows. As for the rest of the conifers, they don't really break bud because they have the scale type foliage that kind of just starts growing again everywhere when it warms up. This is the incense cedar, Calocedrus decurrens, and I'm mainly referring to conifers in the Cupressaceae family, including things like junipers and cypress, and here's incense cedar as well. So they're all looking good.